I apologize for all the crows. Hello everyone, welcome to or welcome back to my channel. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Lena and I make college and book related content here on YouTube, and today I will be sharing with you all my June wrap up. This video is a little louder than normal, or you can hear birds chirping or vehicles driving by. That's because my windows are open. It's really hot and humid. The past few days it's been like over 80 and it doesn't get below 75 at night. So I'm trying not to die because this room has no ventilation. So bear with any birds chirping or things like that. Well, in the month of June, I read 4 books for like non-academic purposes, and then I finished 2 books that I'm reading for academic purposes. The first book I read in the month of June was Pachinko by Min-Jin Lee. I actually started this book at the end of May, but I finished it within the first week of June. This book spans almost an entire century, following one Korean family from the early 1900s into the late 1980s. It begins with Sunja, who is the child of this family who owns a boarding house, and she has an unplanned pregnancy, and due to circumstances she can't just continue to live as a single woman like that, and so she has some sort of a kind of an arranged marriage, and then it just goes from there, and we move several generations down the line. This book, I knew it was going to be good before I got into it, but I was not emotionally prepared for how hard this book was going to wreck me. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. This book, I mean, it blew me away. I am a character person. I love characters. I live for characters. That's why I love to read, is mostly characters. And this is definitely a character book. I fell in love with so many of the characters, particularly Isaac and Sunja. Their relationship made my heart melt. I loved them together. I loved Isaac. He was just so sweet and kind and wonderful. I also really appreciated Noah, who is a character who comes a little bit later on in the book, and I really admired him, and I also completely just felt for him, and I felt like I could totally understand what he was going through. But that was the case for many of the characters. I was really able to empathize with them, even though I have very little life experience that I can actually relate to them. In addition to the characters, there was lots of POVs throughout this book, constantly switching. It didn't always tell you who was who. It did tell you the year and the location, but it didn't always tell you which character was which, and what you thought would be minor characters, we switched to their perspective. Some people complained about that, but I thought that made the book so much richer and complex, and then helped the reader see these characters through others' perspectives, which I thought was really, really wonderful. I also think this book was culturally significant. I learned so much about Korean culture as well as Japanese culture, as well as the relationship between Korea and Japan during this time, and I'm sure much of that continues today. I think this is such an important book. I wish I had read it sooner. I am definitely recommending it to everyone. Favorite book of the month that I read in June, and honestly probably one of my favorite books of 2021 so far. Highly recommend. The next book that I read in the month of June was Red, White, and Royal Blue. This is a much beloved book on Book Talk and Bookstagram and all of those social medias. So I actually was given this book for loan from one of my RCs here at St. Lawrence. RCs are basically my boss, one of my bosses for being a CA. She lent it to me, and you know, I read it initially because it's Pride Month and I wanted to be able to broaden the kind of books I was reading and also read like a romance, because I kind of wanted a lighter read after reading Pachinko. This book basically follows Alex, who is the first son in the United States. That means he is the son of the current president, and then Henry, who is Prince Henry, from the British royal family, and they basically meet and they're enemies in the beginning, and then slowly they fall in love, and their just love story goes from there, and they're kind of ill-fated, maybe because it's like America versus Britain, maybe, maybe not. I gave it 2 out of 5 stars. I would like to say that, 1, I don't read a lot of romance, so I can't really speak to this genre and how it compares in the romance genre, so maybe that's why I didn't like it. And also, I'm not judging anyone who likes this book, because I think that this book definitely has a time and place, and I think it I'm guessing from what I know about the romance genre that it does its job really well. That being said, there were many things I didn't like about this book, mostly the fact that it was incredibly unrealistic for supposedly being set in like a realistic situation. The government aspect, specifically the American government, drove me nuts. Like, I almost had to put down the book multiple times because I could not handle it. It was so unrealistic. I did not like the way the mother, who was the president of the United States, was portrayed. I kind of found it sexist, to be honest. I just didn't like that. I didn't like the way that they discussed government, the senators. It just seemed so trite to me and unreal compared to like what we're living with. I also didn't like the whole Prince Henry thing, because Henry is Prince Harry's real name, and I found that whole kind of rebel wanting to get away from the British royal family a bit on the nose, I'm not gonna lie. I mean, there's Philip and Beatrice in this book, so I don't know how much more obvious you can get. And then the worst part of this book was, for me, is I didn't like their romance. I didn't find it believable. I didn't really sense chemistry between them. I wasn't rooting for them. So even, I think this book was cute and light and fun, but you have to like be bought, you have to kind of buy into the romance, and I just was not able to, and that crow will not shut up. But I know lots of people have, so I think this book does have its time and place. Third book I read in the month of June was On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous by Ocean Vuong. This is a letter from Little Dog, who is writing to his mother, who cannot read. It is a novel, even though it does read like a memoir. And he basically is writing to his mother to kind of explore his own self and identity, as well as the history that he shares with his mother and their entire family. I apologize for all the crows. This book was definitely hyped up for me before I picked it up. I've been wanting to check it out from our library for quite some time now because I had heard so many good things about it. It had been checked out of our library until about the beginning of June, so when I saw it had come back in, I rushed over to get it. I think because it was overhyped, I was a little disappointed, and I also think the reason why people loved this book is exactly what I didn't like about this book. That being said, I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars. As I said, it kind of read like a memoir, and I thought this book did a fantastic job exploring identity, race, what it means to be a man, what it means to be gay, what it means to explore your own masculinity, what it means to be viewed as an outsider no matter where you go, and just an exploration of trauma and the importance of family overall. So I thought it did a great job with exploring those themes and kind of diving into them, and also bringing to light some things that are not often talked about. My biggest issue with this book was the writing. I found it a little too involved with itself. It was a little too flowery and kind of aware of how beautiful it was, and then I kind of got lost in the metaphors and random like twists and turns, and then not the actual point of the story. It just turned into the point of the story was, look at how beautiful this writing is, which kind of annoyed me, to be honest. So that's why I didn't like it, because I just thought the writing wasn't serving a purpose. So that's just my opinion, but I still think it's worth a read. And of course, the explorations of some of these themes are so important in today. The fourth book I read in the month of June was The Deep by Rivers Solomon. This book is actually based off a song, or maybe 2 songs, called The Deep. The premise of this novel is what happened to the baby of the pregnant woman who were thrown overboard of the slave ships during the Middle Passage. And so this book kind of suggests that those babies turned into mer-like creatures. It is a fantasy novella, and I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. I really, really enjoyed this read. I had heard a lot about this book last summer and how amazing it was and how it touched so many people and how the message of the story was so, so, so important. This book as an allegory for the trauma in the Middle Passage and the slave trade that has been inflicted upon Black people, the idea that the importance of history and the oral tradition of sharing history is so powerful in this novel. It's quite a simple book. It's also not very long. It is fantasy, but it has so much meaning and power. I just found this book so powerful, and I highly recommend it. It has so much historical context, and there's so much richness that goes beyond the words into the deeper meaning. This is a book that I would love to read and reread and just pay attention to so many of the different little things that Rivers Solomon drops throughout the book. They are so talented as a writer, and I can't wait to read more of their work. The next book was an academic book, and I finished, for the most part, I don't know, there's probably like 50 pages I haven't read in here or something. But I finished reading the EcoPoetry anthology edited by Anne Fisher-Worth and Laura Gray Street. It's a hefty book. I finished it. for my EcoPoetry class, obviously. I give this book 3 out of 5 stars. Basically, I don't love EcoPoetry, so that's a problem. And I also just did not like the way this anthology was organized. It was split between historical and contemporary, but the contemporary was then organized alphabetically, and I wish that at the very least there were dates next to the poet's names so I could tell who was writing what when and maybe which poem was published in what year. Or maybe organize them chronologically to the best of their ability. I just didn't think the alphabetical was very effective because it was hard to tell when these poems were written and maybe which ones were in conversation with each other or what political or environmental movements were happening. That being said, I guess some of my favorite poets from this anthology would be Mary Oliver, Wendell Berry, Lucille Clifton, Joe Perillo, and Davis McCombs. I really enjoyed all of those, and I mean there are some great poems in here. I just think as a genre, eco-poetry is not something I gravitate towards. But you know, had to read it for class, so that's that. Another book I finished for class was How Paris Became Paris, The Invention of the Modern City by Jean de Jean, or de Jean, I don't really know which one it is. I gave this book 3 out of 5 stars as well. This is basically explaining how Paris became the city it was during the 17th century. This was for my Paris on film class, and that class was studying how Paris is constructed on film, so he wanted us to read this book to better understand how Paris was constructed to begin with. I gave this book 3 out of 5 stars. I think it offers some very basic, nice historical context. It also looks beyond Haussmann and kind of how he gets all the prestige for revamping Paris, but it wasn't really him. He took a lot of inspiration from the 17th century architects and idea people. I thought it was a little simplistic at points. It was very accessible, but I think it was definitely lacking nuance, and it was very Western focused, obviously Paris, and so I think it kind of discounted other cities specifically in the eastern part of the world and kind of just acted like Paris was the best thing ever, which I know that's the point of the book, but I think that this book would leave people walking away with a pretty skewed vision of the world, so that was just a comment of mine. The book that I am currently reading is Indiana by Georges Sand, and this is, I'm on page 190. It's a very weird edition, I know. This is the first book that I'm reading by Georges, and I am really enjoying this book so far. I'm not obsessed with it, I'm not loving it because I have a couple questions, but I mean, I am reading in French, so it's kind of harder to pick up on a lot of things that I have questions about, so that I'm trying to like Google them and like figure out like, am I on the right track? Just because I'm reading this book to improve my French, so there's a lot going on, and as a person who loves literature, at the same time I'm like trying to think about the deeper themes, at the same time I'm just trying to translate it, so you know, it's kind of a mess. But I'm actually really far in the book. I'm proud of myself. The goal is to finish it before I go back home so then I can actually return it to the library, and yeah, I will let you know in July if I recommend this book or not. I am now starting to sweat. It is hot, it is gross today, so I'm going to finish this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions, video recommendations, this week is the last week before finals, and the next week is finals week, so just let me know down in the comments below. I will be happy to answer any of those, and I will see you all next week.